Follow me, my friend, where all that's wrong is right. The winter solstice has barely passed when the dead rise into Sato. It is a cold night, and all save the most committed revellers and conspirators are eager for soft beds and something to warm their spirits before they rest. Those already asleep report dreams turned dark, full of bloody meat and hollow-eyed horrors. Those awake speak of a gusting sigh that passes over the city like an invisible wind. Minutes later, the thudding of bodies hurled against the doors of mausolea, the scrabbling of claws on earth, the squelching of unquiet murder victims dragging themselves from the Vasa, still burdened with bricks and chains. It is traditional in the League for citizens to be cremated, their remains scattered into the river. Only the wealthy or those whose death is premeditated are interred. It is these sorry corpses that the cannibal spirits unleashed by winter magic seek out. The freshest dead first, and then the cold bones and withered remains of the older cadavers. The dead, empowered with movement and violence by unseen spirits, come from across the territory. Almost all are humans, though some have hijacked the remains of orc slaves who died in Sato long before the Empire had ever heard of Thrace or fell in the recent attack on the Sapphire Stair. Many are struck down by terrified Tassatans, but this does little to quell the flow of the dead. They flock to the banners of the Fist of the Mountains, billeted in the Twin Cities since the autumn equinox last year, ensuring that everyone knows who is to blame for this outrage. They are expected. The magicians of the Empire have quickened cold meat, the phantoms unleashed by the enchantment defiling the resting places of the League dead. Many citizens of Tasato, both those of the cities and the towns beyond its walls, are furious. But they have little recourse for now. Less than a week after the dead rise, the Fist of the Mountains is on the move, southwest into Karaman with the Bloodcloaks. They leave folk on both sides of the Vasa with shattered tombs and the knowledge that their deceased ancestors are now nothing more than hosts for murderous winter spirits. In loyalty we stand. From Mornwald, the autumn hammers and the summer storm and the bounders also pass through Southmoor into Braden's Yassa. Past the memorial that was once Fort Braden, down towards Segura, down through the Cinnabar Hills they march over the Sobral Bridge, the only remaining bridge that still spans the tumultuous Socorrero, a fragile umbilical for the people of the Brass Coast, connecting them to the wider empire. Down into dry Segura, to the plains of Burnish, a grand camp for 5 armies and for 6,000 independent captains that flock to the banner of the summer storm, and for those 1,000 flesh-hungry abominations that shadow the Fist. All save the Fist are woven with the clarity of the master strategist, helping their soldiers deploy almost without conscious effort in the most tactically advantageous locations. The Bounders arrive first, scouting the edges of the western hills for the best route into Reynos. Their beaters report the expected watchtowers, wide patrols and simple defences. There will be little resistance to the armies as they cross from the Empire into the lands of the Lysambrian Yatun. To take a blade from the throat of the freeborn, a people whose hands have been riven by war and disaster almost constantly since the time of Empress Britta and before. To bring battle to the lands of the southern orcs, to their allies who pride themselves wise in the ways of virtue. The commanders meet in council, studying the maps and scouting reports, quickly allocating tasks and routes, the magic of the Day Realm smoothing and speeding each discussion. Only the winterfolk of the Fist of the Mountains are left slightly apart, not possessed of the supernatural clarity. Yet there is more to their separation than simply the lack of an enchantment. There is something about the army that feels a little off-centre, a little different. Even the Bloodcloaks can feel it. The presence of the barely contained flesh-tearing abominations, many still in the tattered funeral finery of the wealthy Tassatans, is surely grim, but they are not a new experience for many of these soldiers. This is something else. Some of the Winterfolk soldiers seem just a little too eager to fall on the Western barbarians, a little too quick to sing songs and tell tales of bloodshed and slaughter. There are scuffles between soldiers of the Fist and those of other armies, and keen-eyed bounders murmur unsettling tales of a great black dog with burning eyes that lurks and slinks through the Wintermark camp. The Oathrights, who accompany the Hammers and the Storm, exchange concerned looks, and in whispered tones out of earshot of their Winterfolk allies, they discuss the orders spoken by the general at Hanville. There is little time for introspection or worry about this. There is a campaign to fight, a new campaign in the Southwest Empire. The strategy set, the armies begin to move as one force across the western border of Segura into the Lasambrian hills. Fig trees and olive groves. It's been a long time since Imperial boots trod the dust of the western hills. Not since that time long ago when the Empire sent mercenaries to fight alongside the Hierro against the Yatun invaders. Now the armies of the Empire come in force, with a very different agenda perhaps. They cross from Burnish into the olive groves and fig trees of Riberia. They are not unexpected. The patrols and garrisons of the watchtowers have been reinforced since the winter solstice, it seems. The Orcs of Reynos know that the long-debated peace treaty between the Lasambrian Yatun and the Empire has been rejected by the Senate, and while they are not aware of the coming attack, they are clearly vigilant against the threat from the Empire. The Imperial strategy is a considered and careful, steady advance, seeking to minimise the loss of lives rather than try to capture as much land as possible. Yet with the support of day magic, it is still effective at neutralising the border defences of Reynos and moving consistently forward. The expert healers of the Bloodcloaks work tirelessly to heal those injured in the fighting, establishing mobile field hospitals and supply points along the routes back into Imperial territory. The Autumn Hammers take a different approach. They have called on the contracts that were arranged with the aid of the lictors, inviting the heralds of the City of Chains to support them. Silver and gold-skinned creatures with curving horns and an orc-like cast to their features accompany the Hammers. They effortlessly locate valuable goods and suggest the most effective way for the Imperial Orcs to claim them, encouraging them to seize whenever opportunity presents itself. As they are quick to point out, have the Corathon not stolen from the Empire for centuries? Is it not past time that the balance were restored? There are plenty of opportunities for plunder. Riberia is a wealthy region for all that it is sparsely settled. The olive groves and the fig trees are well tended, and there is a scattering of farms and orchards dedicated to other agricultural endeavours. Some of the loot recovered by the Hammers has clearly been taken from Segura or Karaman. The rest include fine oils and wines, salted meats and jams, beautifully woven tapestries and carpets, delicate mithril and ilium jewellery, decorated weapons and shields, and any number of cunningly sculpted icons plated with precious metal or set with gems mined from the great mountains that run like a seam down the centre of Reynos. While the land is rich, there is no real sign of any thralls such as the Bloodcloaks wish to free. There are labourers and workers aplenty, but they seem little different to the folk who work the Empire's farms. For the most part, they do not hang around when the Imperial armies advance, choosing to flee ahead of them, seeking sanctuary in the larger settlements to the west. They take their essential possessions with them, their beasts and whatever valuables they can carry where they can. They leave the fighting to the soldiers for the most part, but there are reports of farmsteads and orchards defended by barely trained militia who fight tooth and nail to try and keep the Empire from taking their land from them. Signs of the Lasambrians' faith are everywhere. Every farm maintains a shrine to the virtuous ancestors. Sometimes little more than a barn set aside, sometimes a stone building built just for that purpose. These shrines are new, most are barely more than a few years old, but they are clearly well tended. No matter how rude or well built the shrine, the contents tend to be the same. A shelf or alcoves, a simple brazier, and icons depicting the virtues and the orcs that exemplify them. Usually there are 7 icons, but not always. There may be 3 or 5 or a dozen, and nobody knows enough about the Lasambrian Yatun to identify them all, although some of the Summer Storm note that the Fathir of the Yatun are sometimes on display here. Who is the figure of the grinning orc with the bowl of figs? Why is this lady with a pickaxe and crystal eyes worthy of veneration? Who are these three child orcs who huddle together or stand one upon the other with solemn faces? In every shrine there is one constant, an image of Hessar Iskuta, the leader of the old Lysambrians who, it is said, slew the first empress before being killed in turn. There is no consistency as to which virtue he stands for, often but not always courage or pride. No matter how rich the other icons might be, he is always a squat figure of red pottery, with a great sword who sits in the centre of the shrine opposite the door, glowering at all who enter. Some Imperial soldiers are incensed by these shrines, calling them blasphemous or idolatrous. For the most part, however, they are taken in stride. The armies here are marchers, winterfolk and Imperial orcs, and they are no strangers to strange philosophy. And the larger shrines often contain rich pickings for the autumn hammers. The time has come. As the Empire pushes west, light woodlands give way to fertile lowlands and the first large villages are encountered, along with the first serious resistance. The villages are a peculiar mishmash of older wooden structures slowly being replaced by newer stone buildings, often surrounding truly ancient stone structures that harken back to ancient days before the freeborn came ashore at Atalaya. The sea change in the folk of Lysambria that accompanied the 1-2 punch of conquest by the Yatun and the embrace of the virtues is manifest in the architecture. From a folk who felt they had no hope save to rob and steal, the Lysambrians have become a people with ambitions to reclaim the lands of the Brass Coast and build a kingdom for themselves. It's clear there are no armies here, neither Jotun nor Lysambrian Jotun. Indeed, the Hiero and the Escuta appear to be fighting far to the north. The territory is not undefended, however. The fortress of Getchel in the north and Yagara's Proof in the south used the time gained by the border watches to move their garrisons into position, mobilizing the militias and warriors of the towns and villages east of the mountains. This is the first time Imperial troops have faced the Yagara of southern Reynos, humans with a deep spirituality and many Godi among their number. Their commitment to fighting alongside the orcs of the Lysambrian hills is difficult to fathom. Who are they? Where have they come from? How do they fit beside the orcs who raid so freely into the Brass Coast? They fight particularly alongside the warriors of the Hiero Sept, who are strongest in southern Reynos, along with western Kalino, these lands that belonged to them since before there was an empire, if their stories are to be believed. The troops from the north are not uniformly orc, and many of them are members of the Corathon Sept. They are less disciplined, more prone to taking risks, more enamoured of the concepts of glorious battle than their southern fellows, closer to the Yatun in temperament. Both groups work together seamlessly to try and turn the Empire, and for a time it looks as if they might succeed. In the end, though, they are unable to stem the tide of the invaders. The Winterfolk and Marchers and Imperial Orcs take the villages of Ribera one by one, regroup their forces, and decide what to do next. There are three choices. Stop and consolidate their hold over the farms and orchards, press west into Pedriera, push south through Bastator towards Grismont Township. Weighing the odds, the commanders turn south. Now is not the time to try and besiege the fortification of Getchel, and the Herald of the Autumn Realm are quick to inform their orc comrades that there is surely more opportunity for plunder in the south. So the armies move towards the Arena of Virtue, the little city of Grismont Township, and the high font of the Socorrero, the crown of Bastasor. Fighting now in earnest, there is much more evidence of southern Yatun here. Champions and would-be champions join with the garrison to resist the Imperial advance. There are many more people prepared to take up arms than there were in the farmlands, something the Yatun themselves might find inexplicable, but the Lysambrians take for granted. Anyone who cannot fight flees south or north towards the fortifications, the elderly, the youngest, and the infirm making their slow way to sanctuary ahead of the invading Imperial force. The experience of fighting the Lysambrians at home in lands that are at least notionally theirs is different to that of fighting their armies when they are engaged in conquest. A long history of banditry and brigandage serves them well here, scaled up to take into account their greater numbers. They are no more interested than the Empire in suffering extensive casualties, preferring to test and reformulate their strategies, to fight when they can, and to retreat when it is wise to do so. By contrast, the true Yatun, who fight with them, do so in more traditional ways, confronting the Imperial armies head-on, more interested in a challenge than in a wider strategy. There is one matter on which both Yatun and Lysambrian, and especially human Yagara of the south, are united. they show utter contempt for the Fist of the Mountains, for the winterfolk that fight alongside the shambling dead. Wherever possible, they prioritise the shambling corpses, either not knowing or not caring that the spirits bound to the army will simply find new cadavers to exploit. The fact this leads to slain defenders of Reynos rising to join the Windmark army does little to reduce their fury. The Atun consider it a defilement. The Lysambrians who get a chance to do so condemn it as a profound offence against the virtue of pride. Yet their anger is ultimately impotent. The ghouls that fight alongside the Fist rip apart anyone who falls into their claws, and they feast well as Empire and Barbarian clash across Bastasor. Before the walls. Despite all their efforts, the Lysambrian militia and the garrisons cannot stop the Empire's steady conquest. Town and village fall to the invaders, and the armies press forward. As the spring equinox comes closer, the Empire has brought most of the region under its control, at least in theory. The Lysambrians are sullen and uncooperative. They flee when they have the chance, and have no interest in being liberated by the Bloodcloaks. As often as not, they proudly, courageously condemn the Imperial soldiers who have come into their land, damning them for seeking to steal the last piece of Lysambrian homelands, just as they stole Segura and Karaman and Faroz and Madruga and all those other places. The defenders fall back, toward 3 locations across Bastasor. The Arena of Virtue, despite its relative vulnerability on the borders of Ribera, remains in Lysambrian hands despite a protracted battle before its walls between zealous defenders and Imperial soldiers who do not quite know what to make of soldiers who call on the same virtues they do to give them strength to fight. Their defence is reinforced by a significant number of Corathon and Yatun from northern Rykos. Grismont Township is also unconquered. The walls are not really a match for the armies arrayed against it, but time has run out as the slow march across Reynos has dragged on. There is a significant garrison here, reinforced by Yatun champions who have come across the mountains from the western regions of Reynos. They won't surrender the city easily, and they have many supplies within its walls, for all the good it will do them if serious reinforcements do not arrive soon. The rest of Bastasor, though, is in Imperial hands, save only the crown of Bastasor. It is clear there is no easy way for armies to approach the lake high up in the mountains. But access to the waters is now in the control of the Empire, specifically the Summer Storm, who have taken the foothills and the narrow winding paths that lead up to the crown. Spring flowers bloom in the foothills and across the plains, hardy orange and yellow blooms that can endure the warmth and the sometimes harsh conditions here. The Empire has made gains, but the Lysambrians have fought them every step of the way, and there is no sign they plan to stop fighting them anytime soon. Game information. Reynos. Reynos remains in Yatun hands, but the Empire has conquered the easternmost region of Riberia and is now on its way towards taking Bastasor. The only parts of that latter region that are still in Lysambrian hands are the township of Grismont and the Arena of Virtue. If nothing changes, it's likely the Empire will conquer these last 2 locations following the spring equinox, and most likely to take Xaviero as well. After that, they will need to face one of the 2 fortifications that guard the passes to western Reynos, which will be a more challenging proposition, assuming nothing changes, of course. Without guidance from the generals, the commanders on the ground choose to avoid the fortification at Pedriera and push south, partly because to do so otherwise would have significantly reduced the amount of land they would claim and expose them to significant losses. The only significant defence this season has been the garrison of the 2 forts, Getchel and Yagara's Proof. Between this and the Empire's tactics, it means that none of the invading armies have taken any significant casualties. Participation. Armies. The fact the Fist of the Mountain were fighting alongside flesh-eating animated cadavers taken from the graves of Tasato is obvious to everyone in the territory, especially anyone whose military unit supported an army there. The soldiers fighting under the banner of the Fist have been slightly more prone to bloodthirst than usual, but that has not yet led to any particularly atrocious behaviour. No military units supported the Fist of the Mountain, so any peculiar influences are restricted to the Reynos campaign rather than being obvious at Anvil. Participation. Tasato. Anyone who was in Tasato following the winter solstice will either have witnessed the dead rise or seen the aftermath thereof. The quickening cold meat enchantment causes winter spirits to seek out dead bodies and animate them as ghoulish warriors. In the League, all save the wealthiest are cremated rather than being buried, which means that many of those risen unliving horrors are the remains of princes, guildmasters, bishops, and other rich citizens whose tombs were maintained by their families or guilds. There were also a number of murder victims among them, risen from shallow graves or out of the waters where their bodies had been weighed down and dumped. Finally, around Cascatus, some of the dead Yatun orcs and Yagara who attacked the Sapphire Stair have likewise been animated. No living Tasartan citizens were harmed as a result of this, but many have been horrified or upset by the desecration of tombs and gravesites. Characters from Tasato are encouraged to create stories about how the Night of the Risen Dead has impacted them. Battle opportunity. Tame your fears. Prognosticators have identified a major conjunction of the Sentinel Gate that will allow Imperial heroes to intercede in Reynos. The conjunction leads to Bastasor, to the vicinity of Grismont Township, and it is believed it may allow the Empire to help break the siege there.